Okay, there's the hand from our favorite pink doodle.
Yeah, I mean, I do have some stuff to say about prime sets, new ones versus not having new ones, but like, I've said so much in the text chat lately that I don't know that
It
I
hits
want to
different
say
on
that.
voice though, you know?
Yeah,
So
that's true. Yeah. Yeah,
I
I
guess
just
yeah, I'll let you guys share your thoughts here. Wanna again, the point of these is to hear from uh other people, not from EPs. So our goal really with V3 was in response to the feedback from V2. I think the consensus among some people in the community was that it had been a little bit of an V2 had been a little bit of an over tightening, and V1 for that matter, actually, when it comes to sets. And so our goal with V3 was to extend a little bit of an olive branch, kind of try to find a more of a middle ground while still representing the interests of the prime community at large. And our job as EPs is to ensure that the ecosystem and P2E and all that good stuff stays healthy and sustainable. So that was our goal in coming up with the latest solution to the prime set taper, which was the 36-month linear taper ending at 4.5%. We feel like it does kind of a good job of balancing that line. And yeah, but obviously want to hear from you guys what your thoughts are, and so I will mute now.
Yeah, may I start boarding, or do you want to go first?
I might like to go first just because the sort of the order in the bulletin kind of we're at V3 now, and I kind of didn't put a lot of thought into it until recently about what this dilution argument is, and I think I do want to go first to talk a little bit about that because it kind of frames the whole discussion that we've been having, which might be a little frustrating. And I'm like, wait, let's go back a lot from where we're at right now and talk about something that I think changes the whole conversation. Sorry, my mic was pointed away if the sound was weird, but I think it does. So most of the argument is like, why should we take less prime, setting aside the amount of sync portion that actually goes to prime sets. This is just about how do you divvy up prime among prime sets that exist. And this bulletin says, well, before there were going to be new prime sets, so there was going to be dilution of the OG ones, PS15 through PD6, which hasn't quite happened yet. But you were going to get less from those if you didn't form new ones, is the argument. So it's this assumption that, well, either way, even if you form new ones, you're still going to get less from the old ones. But there's this assumption that, like, well, people maybe don't want to form new ones because it costs more money, and then there's other people who do. But when looking at this, the important thing, I think, is what's going to change for the groups of people involved in the change. So the number of groups of people involved for this change, dilution of the OG sets, is, well, there's people who have OG sets and there's people that don't. And this doesn't affect the people that don't. So we only care about the people that have the OG sets. Okay. And then within that set of people who have OG sets, there's the people who are going to build new prime sets if they exist. And there's the people who aren't. And what this change does in the bulletin is a larger proportion of prime goes to people who aren't buying new cards. And it also takes away incentives for people to buy more new cards. both of those things I claim are bad for Echelon and Parallel. And the arguments around this are predicated on this being somehow good for Echelon and Parallel. And I don't understand that. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I can maybe quickly comment on that because I actually disagree here, which is a bit surprising. I thought we were on the same page already. So just before I go to my comments, just to quickly react on this, I think it is good for Parallel and Echelon because it is desirable that the value of new cards is lower because the NFT cards are a labor tool for players to participate in P2E and earn Prime. Now, if you commingle this thesis, which I believe should be the prevalent thesis going forward, if you commingle this ability to buy cards and earn Prime for players, which should be key, this is where I fully agree with Fall and Bu and Meta, with just kind of making new sets as an investment assets to passively earn Prime, it will always push the price of the NFT cards higher, perhaps too high for a player to purchase them, because we're talking about thousands of dollars for a Prime set, especially considering the hook in the OG prices. I mean, I personally invested close to $1 million into Prime sets. Obviously, that's why I have some bias and perspective in this as well. But considering there's like, I don't know, up to 10,000 OG sets, the anchor and the relative value of one set will always be there. So now if we continue with issuing more sets, the price will always be anchored to that. Price will always give incentives to passive investors to hoard them and buy them, and thus these NFT cards will be less available for players. So in my opinion, it is flawed to stick on issuing new sets. So that's just a comment to what you said. So I fully support the general notion here to stop issuing new sets, not because that would be good for myself. I think it would be rather good for myself to keep 15% on issuing sets. Hence, also coming to my other point, it kind of invalidated my investment thesis, which is fine as long as it's for the greater good and we find the compromise. But yeah, that's just on what you said, and I don't know if you want to react or if I should continue with my comments.
Sorry, my headphones died partway through that. Unfortunate.
Right. Okay, so I want to also say a couple of things. Starting with two quick disclaimers. So number one, I speak for myself, not for any DAO or any investment entity I represent. Number two, I also want to apologize to EPs and the community for the harsh voice in 2 days ago. Yesterday, I think, was already fine, but there were some things that triggered me, and I kind of went ballistic, and that wasn't right. So sorry. Mainly, I think Kalos got most of it in DMs. So if he was here, it would be to him, but also to Fall and all of you guys. And with that, I think I just want to comment on two principles that guide my view on this as an investor. So one is the integrity of design. So, there's Prime proposal, it was being worked on for 6 months intensively, perhaps much more on the conceptual idea generation level. Then it was presented in January, 15% for the parasets was there, obviously with the disclaimer that everything can change, which is fine, which obviously I'm not naive and don't think that things are carved in stone, but I guess we will mostly agree here that integrity of the white paper as a kind of general father of design should be there to a large degree. Obviously, there can be always changes if they are well justified. And now the notion here with parasets is the justification is that probably 15% to the set holders for like these passive rent seekers is too high in the long term because it perhaps caps the price because these people will sell a lot. And I don't know, maybe in some tokenometric models, it even leads to some unhealthy situation where there is too much sell pressure. Especially, I would say, possibly like 3-4 years from here, when the amount of new users coming to the game kind of peaked. So if you don't have new people absorbing the sell pressure, and there's just existing people and who have already have their sale patterns, like economic patterns, like they earn some prime, maybe they buy some prime, they sink some prime. Some of the grinders will also sell prime. Like, let's not be naive and kind of think that players don't sell much. Like, some of the people will really try extract value and be mostly selling, but it's fine. I agree that passive investors will always sell more. So that's fine. So I kind of understand the general motivation in the model, even though I'm coming from, conceptual and gut feeling, understanding of how these things work. I also have quite some experience with them from other projects. So now that's all fine. So coming back to what I think should be done and why I started pushing back like before Christmas. So I think that from an investor perspective, it is kind of legit to expect that, hey, 15% was the original design. Maybe it also doesn't make sense that there will be forever more prime sets issued. So obviously nothing is guaranteed, but as an investor, I would say smarter investors kind of assume that it's not super likely that like all the new expansions will be suddenly prime sets for the reasons I mentioned early on. And even if they were, I could simply keep buying them and maybe end up in even better position. So that's kind of my, I'm a collector, I invested money, maybe I over-invested, so that's kind of also thing. I should maybe sell some to be kind of less emotional on these changes, and that's all valid. But this is basically the perspective of the investor who is getting harmed. So that's my thesis number one. Now, number two, how to deal with that. I'm a reasonable collaborative investor. I also like to involve myself with the projects I invest in and maybe help with these things. So I'm not blocking anything. I'm happy for a compromise. But even like 15% to 5% is quite a harsh reduction. I originally proposed going from 15% to 5% over the period of 60 months. I think 5% is no big deal. Obviously, I don't have detailed tokenometry, but 5% is, fine. And going there in like maybe 60 months is too long, but also like 3 years feels like quite sharp. So when I agreed to false notion or kind of this explorative idea V4 or whatever it is, I mainly did it to kind of protect my emotional sanity. So I feel like 5% over 3 years is still quite harsh considering the original design. And yeah, I would personally prefer to go to 5% over 60 months or maybe 48. So this is my appeal to EPs to still consider that. I don't know how I can make official proposal. Maybe you guys can guide me there, but to kind of protect the collector interests here, I would like to propose like 5% over, I don't know, probably 48 months is kind of like reasonable in my mind. The proposals that EPs made and discussed, I can live with them. I will not be, doing more flames. If anything, it's bad for me. And the reason I kind of exploded on the V3 nonlinear is because all these reasons I kind of suppressed them over past 4 weeks. It kept bugging me over Christmas. I shared some stuff with Kalos and DM and was kind of hoping for a good compromise, which I feel we're getting there. And now it's probably coming down to the details. Is it my original 5% over 60 months or 5% over 48 months, which I would probably now, that would be my preference, because I also see some of the arguments from the camp one, so to speak, or like what's coming next. And that's probably a question for Fall and Meta and the other guys. And also obviously feel free to pick any loopholes in my view and maybe provide counter thesis.
Go ahead, Fall. I saw we both unmuted at the same time.
Yeah, hey everybody, this is Fall. Yeah, thank you both for sharing your perspectives on this and splitting this this challenge into two camps is an interesting approach as to how we can navigate this change as a community. A few things that I wanted to address from the last 20 minutes of conversation, and apologies if I've forgotten some nuance to these, but I'll do my best to address them. One was the comment of we're primarily focusing on set holders here when it comes to the concerns of the community and things like that. And I don't think that's entirely accurate. We represent over 50,000 holders of parallel assets, all with different portfolio sizes if we want to look at it from a NFT ownership in terms of dollar value perspective. And we also have different interests. Some people are here to collect cards, some people are here to play games, some people simply like the memes and want to be a part of the community. So when it comes to us balancing and proposing these changes, we once again very much so appreciate the passionate and the passionate responses that we receive from the community, but we're balancing so much more. So when it comes to what seems reasonable to one camp, very rarely is that the solution that is what we view as best for all camps. To continue this to something that you were saying, Mr. Kivak, which was that we are, in your view, I forget exactly the word that you used, so please forgive me there, in some way harming prime set investors. And you often like to use the term rugging when we were speaking about this in text. Those were conveniently deleted, but I fail to see how giving more prime for the same amount of dollars invested is harming people who have already allocated capital based off of the prime paper. And on top of that, I do not see how this is rugging in any way, shape, or form either. So I would like to ask the community to please steer away from unnecessary inflammatory comments when we're discussing difficult topics. We're guiding a very complicated ship here with many stakeholders. And the more time we spend rooted in emotion, the less time we can be productive. So that's just a personal request to everyone here. Another note, though, is yes, the long-term investment thesis of being able to continually acquire prime sets to maximize the ability to passively earn prime is being changed with this proposal. And for people that were planning on doing that in the long term, that sucks. I hear you. We do have, and admittedly, there aren't details out about this yet. So I'm asking for trust, which sucks. this should be a trustless, decentralized environment. But we do have a card sharing system that is coming out that will allow those of you with collections that won't be using all of those cards in game, either because you simply have way too many cards or you're just not interested in playing the game. You'll be able to provide these cards to those who do want them and earn passive prime. So the ability to earn prime for large collections or non-active collections in terms of you using them is still there. It's just being shifted. So the stance that investment thesis is gone, I simply disagree with. However, I do not blame you for making that statement, as the details around card sharing aren't available yet. That is something that is on my plate, and it will be available soon. I know you all love hearing that. That's all I have for the first round of discussion. Looking forward to hearing your responses.
Yeah, I just want to say that I didn't delete or edit any of my comments. So the assertion of stuff conveniently deleted, probably not directed to me. Just to clarify that. And on the rack, yeah, fair enough. Perhaps that's used loosely. On the other hand, probably need to find a succinct term that defines the sentiment without any inflammatory context, and the sentiment is there. So probably the right term I settled on is integrity of the offering, and to kind of send this ball back to you. I've never heard anything like, hey, we issued the white paper, we advertised 15% to prime set collectors there, and now we realized this was wrong. And perhaps it would also be less entitled and more cooperative way, rather than just proposing a cut to 3%, to maybe say, hey, sorry, we didn't plan this well from the beginning very well. Are you still on board? So that's maybe about the sentiments here. I don't want to dwell too much on it, like we have 5 minutes left. So let's probably go to what's the possible ways forward from here.
Sorry about my mic. It's cutting out, so I couldn't really respond to your response to the comments I made. Quack. But thanks for your comments, Paul. I do have a question about the card sharing things. You're sort of saying, okay, we have a card sharing thing coming. It'll be a way to emit prime to people who passively hold. And you're saying this is somehow countering some kind of change being made. And there aren't details out. Maybe you're willing to say from which pool of tokens the payout of that prime will be coming from?
Yeah, I can just quickly jump in here to answer that. It would be the play to earn emissions directed to people who have borrowed those cards. Some of that would be directed to those who have provided the cards.
Right. So it's like they're not your cards. You don't get all the profit from having. Makes sense. And that would come from play to earn. Yeah. So I'm confused. That seems quite independent of this change. Like that was going to happen regardless of whether or not this bulletin went through. Right? Like card sharing was always cooked in. I mean, I'm a lot later to this. I only started, allocating a lot of capital in like September. So maybe I came in and was like that's always been something I knew was going to happen. Or maybe I'm just a little crazy optimistic that it was always going to happen. But to say that, all right, we're going to reduce prime in some way, which I totally buy the argument that we're not reducing prime to OG sets from what the original prime proposal said, that at various steps it has already increased, and this does do an increase compared to one perspective on holding OG sets.
Yeah, I can probably address. I think some of this has to do with the timeline of the 4% being realized over the course of the 3 years, because that's where the greatest vulnerability in the emission structure was as the modeling came out. Right? Is that accurate, Paul?
That is accurate.
Yeah, so there is some benefit around the 3 to 4 year mark. That like the priority is that if the weakest point in the play to earn pool occurs around the 3 to 4 year mark, you want to address that issue before that. You know, the sooner you get ahead of that, the lesser the issue could kind of spiral into a more critical problem. And so I think some of the benefit, sure, there's a concession made in that there's a buff to the sets as a result of kind of the movement from 15 to 4, but the kind of unseen benefit is the resolution of the issue to manage the 3-year start of potential trouble problem to ensure that we kind of fix that. And we thought somewhere between year 3 and year 5 would sufficiently address it, and if we can get it up to year 3, that's even better, so that it's
Makes
not
sense,
a problem. Yeah. So I think there's kind of like this invisible benefit of the time horizon that was stumbled upon. Well, we knew what it was. We were more conservative in saying, okay, 4 or 5 years probably sufficient. Let the problem, mature a bit, and if it's real, then we'll have to resolve it by year 5. But if we can get ahead of it by resolving it by year 3, then we'll be in a better spot, and that's where the concession was made.
All of that makes sense, and like from the perspective of not wanting to get behind on an issue, and why you would, even want to have more gameplay value flowing for that. But the point I'm trying to make about that is I see those as separate issues from the things happening in the bulletin. Like that card sharing system was going to exist, and there was going to be a greater amount of prime going to people for just holding their cards if they opt into the card sharing in whatever capacity they have to do that. But I don't see how that changes the particular tokenomics decisions around this bulletin. Like, it's a great extra thing that you're going to get more prime, but we were going to get that anyway.
I think that's, sure. Yeah, I'm not fully in disagreement at all here. I think that's probably predicated also on demand, right? Like, it's less, I guess the one thing that's worth highlighting is that it's not a guarantee, right? Because it could be a very competitive market and you don't have the players to utilize your cards. So there's something in that as well, but I'm not disagreeing with you.
I also want to comment on that. So if this is the case, and it kind of makes sense that the plateau of players is probably reached and the initial distribution in the prime P2E pool is depleted, why don't we have a solution that's perhaps more forthcoming to prime set collectors in the year 1 and 2? For example, keeping it at 15%, and then going quickly down to 5% and keeping it there. That would certainly help alleviate some of my pain, and probably my voice is representing more of the prime set collectors.
Yeah, I think we want to find fast remedy on this, and I think we've kind of landed where we think, look, there's a lot of other items to take care of, and I think we're just looking to move forward here in a way that both it does solve our problem in the existing, model that I guess Paul has last worked on. So we're not really wanting to open up that can of worms again, unless Paul decides that that's, the modeling dictates that that's necessary. So
I understand
I think to your point, Mr. Kabak, that there sort of is this equilibrium between the P2E and prime sets, at least the way that we've teed it up, because the exchange is happening across those lines. And so that's kind of where the trade-off is, right? So if we were, I don't think the suggestion of leaving it at 15% for the first 2 years and then dropping down suddenly is the right solution, because like fall, like we just sort of suggested, right? There might tend to be kind of more throughput sort of at the beginning. Obviously, none of this is known, but we feel pretty confident that the latest bulletin does a good job of kind of riding the line, providing enough value back to set holders that set holders are comfortable with, but at the same time keeping enough flow to P2E where the system can survive and thrive in a time where it's hopefully scaling a lot of players. So we feel pretty confident that the latest iteration of the bulletin does a good job of balancing that.
Yeah, so I have two comments on that. First, it makes sense to me. One is conceptual point. So what's the actual problem? I understand that the problem is investors selling a lot of prime if they are kept at 15%. Fair enough. You could argue that lower price of token is good for onboarding of new people from Web 2 to Web 3. So I don't fully subscribe to this being a problem. And hence, and I said it multiple times in Discord, I see this as really unilliterate value transfer from prime set collectors to everybody else, because token price will be higher if these people don't sell. And that is really clearly going against the integrity of the initial prime proposal. Obviously, everything can change. I respect that, but I personally still see like from 15% to 5% over 3 years as a pretty harsh change. And I'm not gonna lie that I mostly agreed to it because I have no voice. And secondly, there's a lot of pressure.
I would actually disagree, though. I think you've had the loudest voice in this matter. I think you have, and like I think we've had audience as well as other people. We've had public audience. I think you're suggesting that it's in the intention of value transfer away from prime sets. It's really not. It's just in the interest of a sustainable and healthy ecosystem. And I think why? Can you define sustainable and healthy ecosystem? Does it mean higher token price?
No. Token price is not.
It means play to earn pools stay healthy, right?
Yes.
It's about the balance of the play to earn pool remaining in a sufficiently if we encounter a situation where the play to earn pools drop dramatically, the cost of all sinks must go up. Everything essentially inflates because essentially you have a larger circulating supply in the economy and you're essentially diminishing the play to earn pool, eliminating rewards from future players and kind of killing that over time, killing that emission structure. And that's what it's really servicing. It's not servicing anything other than the ability to ensure that when I say the health, the balance of the play to earn pool remains in a spot that is sustainable. That's the.
I get it.
Just from that's fine. I wanted to say that.
Yeah, I get it, and that's fine. I agree with these things. Can I just have, for the sake of my mental sanity, can I hear from you guys that perhaps you made a mistake in the original prime proposal when you put the prime sets to 15%? If you think it's wrong now?
I don't think it's a mistake. I think it was a proposal, right? And I think there's so many moving components to creating an ecosystem like this and validating that ecosystem that it's really not. I think we were pretty clear in communicating that we had to, one, it was a proposal, two, the community would be able to chime in, and three, that there's a number of validation activities that would have to occur. And so I don't feel like an apology is necessary, and I'm not trying to be rude, but I don't feel like it's something that solves anything. I feel like that's something that's it's like that was the title was that, the disclaimers were that, and it wasn't in the interest of protecting or safeguarding me or anyone else from anything. It was just in the interest of trying to legitimately explain that there was a very high likelihood that things would change. You know, and I don't mean any disrespect by it, but I don't feel like I did anything wrong. I feel like
No,
that was
fair enough.
captured. Yeah, I genuinely mean that. I don't mean any disrespect to you by declining that. I mean to say that it's not like it was intended to dupe someone, which is sometimes what, you know, how the communication comes off as suggested. And that was never the intention, if that's what you're, you know.
No, that's fine. I don't mean to press you further. I'll probably perhaps close this sentimental exchange in a statement that things are a little different when you invest a lot of money into them based on a white paper, or if these are, you know, concepts and numbers in the model. So that's why we probably will always have some tension on this topic. But coming back to my question, what are we going to do next? I would pretty much like to not reduce that half percentage extra that somehow appeared in this morning. So like in my mind, like fall explored 5% over 36 months. I'm happy with that. I would pretty much like 5% over a longer period, but now I can hear that if you have like a plateau problem exactly at year 3, that's perhaps not viable. So yeah, so what next?
In regards to the change from 5% to 4.5%, that came from a review with all of the EPs, and we crunched the numbers and determined that 4.5% is the best in terms of risk balancing on all of the different ecosystem participants that we're trying to account for here. So that slight change was not supposed to be any sort of last minute trying to sneak it in sort of thing. More so the 5% that I posted and tagged you in a few days prior was an exploration, and after reviewing it with the rest of the team, we had concluded that 4.5%, although a slight change, was a change that most properly, in our views, represented all of our various participants.
Okay, thanks for the answer. It's not like as a collector I can do anything with it, so I can just say, all right.
Sometimes in a situation like this, it's like the best solution is when almost no one leaves happy and everyone leaves somewhat satisfied. And I think like the model, you know, whatever the EPs, you know, ratify ultimately, which is the next step to answer the question, is really where we're going to move and just move on to the other items that we have to handle. I don't think we want to be stuck on anything. I think like there are people in the community who have a very different opinion, although have less maybe attention on that opinion, Mr. Kavak, than yourself. But it doesn't mean that both voices shouldn't be heard equally. And so I think like what we're going to do is make sure that we understand and have had all the remaining conversations be some of them less attention grabbing. And that's not a shot. That's just to say it has less eyeballs on it, and make sure we try and represent the community the best we can while also serving the function of ensuring that the ultimate objective of the remedy of the kind of horizon around 3 years being satisfied. So I think that's kind of how I see it at the moment, is like, what is the best kind of middle ground that we can take to move forward, and knowing that the ecosystem is satisfied as best as possible and its needs to pair set and prime set holders feel that at minimum they've been heard and their feedback has been accounted for, and people who don't align with an increase have have their feedback heard and are accounted for as well. I think that's our goal, really, right? Just to kind of lay it out and to sunset that with a final communication around it that says, okay, everyone had an opinion, everyone was heard, we tried to capture the best solution we possibly can, and we're ready to proceed, and it doesn't long-term hurt the ecosystem. Those are the conditions, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So with that said, like Kalos was indicating, our next step here, this is the first time we've had a bulletin with multiple versions like this. So I think we will make one last version here that's just sort of taking out the orange text and stuff, so that I'm probably also taking out that disclaimer at the top, which says it's not final until ratified. And then EPs will proceed to a vote. And then we'll have closure on Bulletin 2202. And like Kalos was also indicating, we have internally kind of determined a policy that we'll only do one bulletin at a time. So by closing this chapter, it means that we can start looking at other cool stuff. For example, that 20% glint revenue for Echelon is a cool, exciting thing that we want to discuss with the community. So yeah, I think that is how we proceed, and you guys will see an update from us probably in the next couple days with a vote on Snapshot from the EPs.
Oh, we're gonna move to a vote. I mean, I don't know how other people feel about it, and it was an unfortunate time my headphones going off that part of the conversation got derailed because I missed most of what Mr. Quack said, but I didn't hear any responses from any of the EPs about my reservations to doing away with future prime sets.
We're not doing away with future prime sets, though, right? Paul?
That's yes, we are planning on not having any additional prime sets after what's about to occur in Pack Drop 6.
Okay, so I didn't know that. I mean, from Parallel side, we've always planned, Planetfall and subsequent sets as expansions. From the Echelon side, obviously, it's I don't know, my personal bias on the matter is it seems like this, and I know, Kvak, this is not directed at you. This is just in general, although you won't like this. I've always thought that was like kind of a married. And this is an assumption. It's not something that's captured, I don't believe, in the paper, but I was always kind of under the assumption that subsequent sets should be able to participate and realize the same kind of opportunities that the existing sets have. That's just my own personal opinion, even if that's not captured in what Fall's documented. But I understand that essentially causes dilution that requires investment from people who want to collect existing sets or by purchasing more additional sets. So I'll have to get up to speed on that part, but
yeah, well, I mean, I think that was the assumption before, right, that most people had, and so that's why when we've plotted these taper charts, we've always plotted them against what the original set prime, what the original
you plotted
prime
them
sets
against
would have gotten,
right?
exactly. Because the previous assumption was that there would be that taper from the new sets coming in, so that's why we kind of plot those two lines against each other, because the conclusion of V3, or this bulletin in general, if we ratify it as is that it's actually a net buff to prime sets when all is said and done in terms of the original
prime
base
sets
sets.
Don't continue to expand as the ecosystem grows. It's almost like things are a moment in time and stop, right?
Right.
That said, I mean, it's a buff.
Yeah.
To OG prime sets, you're definitely getting more prime than you would have gotten. The place where I differ is that this is a change. So there's really just, is it better or is it worse for some group of people in terms of prime emissions? And I've seen this in the chat, that one of these counter arguments to what I'm about to say is that, well, you are saying that people are only going to buy Planetfall because they get to cash it. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's an extra incentive. Because it's an extra incentive, well, is a single person gonna maybe buy another pack because they can form a set? I think the answer is yes, and I think the number of people that will do that is greater than one, and that's good for Parallel. And it's good for Echelon, because all of that trading activity, all of that more card lending activity, all of that stuff drives velocity. And it drives money to Parallel, and we should want money to Parallel, or in more general setting, any Echelon participating game studio, we want further participation, constant activity, because that drives more velocity, it drives more interest, it compounds network effect. Taking away incentives to being an active participant doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm kind of in. So this is again, I'm still kind of ensuring I understand all the details. I didn't realize that the prime sets were nodding, and this is my own just being my own admission of probably needing to dig in a bit even further here to make sure I understand what I was looking at there. But I think that my understanding was similar to Boring's on this one. Is that yes, there is, I guess, what is perceived to be dilution if you don't participate in future sets as a result of prime sets being created, and that is under my assumption that any expansion sets would have been included. I think it becomes like this problematic, and just being again super open, talking about it openly. Don't have all the answers. Who knows if I'm right or wrong? But I kind of agree here in that like it's almost prohibiting future prime sets or people who buy future parallel sets from pack drops, be it Planetfall or onwards, from participating in a portion of the economy arbitrarily. Well, not arbitrarily. It's more like in the interest of preserving, the emission flow to the OG holders, right? It's like anti-dilution. It's an anti-dilution mechanism, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we looked at this subject as a whole, like when looking at the 15%, the 15% was not sustainable in terms of the P2E balance in the long term, full stop, right? So 15% was a non-starter, and so I think for then our job as EPs is we're sort of, when we've discussed this previously in the call, is that we're weighing the needs of the 50,000 prime holders and also collectors of various assets and the players. And so in weighing all of these items together, we sort of have to balance between, on the one hand, right, it's P2E would be better off if we just had 100% of everything flow back to, like if sinks just went 100% back to P2E. But obviously our job is to tread that line. And so in order to be able to justify a reduction from 15%, we felt that it was appropriate to sort of cement the original base sets as the OG prime sets. And it was kind of like the way that we were able to make that compromise, right?
I understand the logic, right? And I'm just in the interest of having the conversation and open discourse here because we're talking about it and I'm learning things still. I think I guess it's how do we justify the longer term the longer tail participants who haven't joined the ecosystem, haven't heard about Parallel and are going to, why are we excluding them? The question that I ask, and maybe this is too Parallel focused, I'm putting the wrong hat on, is kind of like, why wouldn't they participate? Like, why wouldn't they be able to participate? And the answer is, because the paper had a 15% emission, and we're taking it down to, what are 4 or 5 or whatever it is, and we're stepping it, and it's like, yeah, okay, cool.
I tell you why, Kalos. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah,
because if it remains a capital asset, investors like me will buy all of them anyway, and hence these people who actually need these cards as P2E labor tool will not be able to get them. This is why I agree with Fall and Bu and the other EPs that it's essentially a flawed design to have cards as capital investment asset to earn passive yield.
I don't buy this line of reasoning. I don't understand. There's the scenario that we're in now, and there's the future scenario, and you can very clearly just like make a conclusion about will there be more in one scenario or more in another, and there will be more in the pockets of people who do nothing and sit to
Exactly,
value
and
extract.
that's
not
problem.
good for your existing assets. That'll devalue the current assets that you have. Maybe if everything else equivalently goes really well and there's not enough dumping that happens, that Prime gets to go up and up and up, then there might be value that can flow to these really inflated assets of the OG sets that are already really hard to get. I've been trying to buy PD1 FE. I can't do it. If you tell me those assets become more valuable and more scarce, the value's not going to retain in them.
I think
So
with respect, you're getting confused here, because what I said is if you kept Prime sets as earning yield, investors would always buy them. So we're on the same page. That's the problem. So that's my answer to Chaos.
It's good.
No, it's bad because players don't get their hands on cards which they need to earn Prime. Period.
So
Okay,
I think you're saying the same thing actually a little bit here. I think what you're both saying is I think you're both, correct me if I'm wrong here, Boarding, but like I think what you're both saying is, hey, new Prime sets should accrue, should actually, and I'm going to use probably they're not right terminology for this, but essentially they are going to be dilutive to existing Prime sets, but that's a good thing because it creates better distribution, essentially, right? Because
that's a feature of what it does, but please continue.
Yeah. So I think that is what I believe I'm hearing is what you're both saying, which I'm in that, and this is going to sound contrary to probably what was published, but that's also how Echelon works, is not all of us have the same opinion. But I think that is, how do you marry that to an emission tapering that realizes the play to earn pool's stability, theoretical stability, right? It's all based on modeling, but how do you marry that is the question. And is it possible to do so while, and maybe this is for fall, right? Is it possible to maintain the continued prime set creation through Planetfall and onwards, so that everyone can participate? So like if you do come in only at Planetfall as some gamer who's like, oh, this is really cool, I do want to buy a bunch of cards, and oh look, I've got a Prime set, and you get to participate. Is it still possible to achieve that while resolving the issue of the 3 to 4 year, somewhere between 3 and 5 is actually the theoretical, I believe, horizon on the play to earn pool? Is that possible? And doesn't that just work out to, I don't know. I'm just trying to ask the question the best I can here.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. Ultimately, if the modeling has recognized that the play to earn pool has risk associated with it, and that risk has been identified to be closely tied to the amount of passive Prime being paid out within the ecosystem. The play to earn pool ultimately is viewed as a customer acquisition and retention tool that is autonomously built to this ecosystem. So ensuring that it has a constant flow of Prime is pivotal to all of our success in the long term. So when it comes to reducing the allocation to parasets as was originally laid out in the Prime paper, the question is, what sort of things can we put onto the bargaining table to make it so that those who have already purchased Prime sets are not too negatively affected or negatively affected at all by this reduction? So if we're to include parasets into the future and we're to reduce the paraset allocation from 15% down to a lower amount, then we will be subjecting those who have already purchased parasets to a double, to two different sources of dilution. And that's just, it seems like a very, very harsh approach. And my belief is that we would have experienced much more feedback in a negative way from the community if we had even tabled that sort of proposal. So we proposed the idea of, okay, if we get rid of the creation of parasets from Planetfall and onwards, then we only have one side of a reduction to deal with. And then the people that already exist now that are fortunate enough to have heard about Parallel early on, I came in on PD3 and I wish I heard about it at PD1, but that aside, if for those of us who are already here and have already allocated capital here and are collectors and are passionate, We should only be trying to make sure that they are not negatively affected by this change while also achieving the long-term goals. And
Is
the
that
cleanest
possible, or is that not possible? But while keeping in, sorry to interrupt you, Fall, but is that possible while keeping in the additional expansion sets being included in prime sets?
I don't believe it's possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Without
is because I
without the
think a lot of the
consideration
things
without the consideration of card sharing. It's not that those with collections will be unable to use those collections without playing the game necessarily to be able to earn Prime. Card sharing will still be an option for all of those who come in and purchase Planetfall and onwards cards and aren't using them actively in the game and are providing those cards to those who are using them actively within the game. So it's not that we're removing the ability for collectors to earn Prime. It's that it is being shifted from parasets to more of a skillful engagement with the ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. You want to encourage utilization. Essentially, you're offering rewards for utilization, which increases players, which increases optics and engagement with the brand and the ecosystem, which makes sense. I remember this conversation now. Okay. Yeah. So, but then, and so boarding, you had something you wanted to say on that.
Yeah, just each of us tends to speak for quite a while, so it's a little hard to fully address everything the other says. But Follow, you said several things there that, one, I want to point out and say that I definitely understand why these considerations have to be made, and that's OG set holders feeling a double dilution. I totally get that, and there's like a bunch of humans on the other side of this call that have experiences based on these choices, and that is important. But I feel as though you've predicated certain things on other things that are actually quite independent. And if you look at them slightly differently, then you're going to have to make a bunch of these choices regardless of the changes that are made. So like this, I think you're sort of conflating, because of the thing that you pointed out with having this human experience of feeling like a double dilution, of wanting to reduce the 15%, which is something that's going to happen. And that is, in a certain sense, independent of whether or not you include old or new prime sets. Of course, it's all interconnected, but genuinely, whether or not you made this choice, you'd have to cut down from 15%. I don't really see a reason for that. And from my perspective, what it sounds like you're saying in the model is that there's going to be an experience of, in order to get the prime that the user wants to get to keep being part of the ecosystem, they're going to have to buy it in one scenario versus being able to earn it and not have to buy it in the other. And we should be promoting the earn it and not have to buy it. And that's the shift from passive earn to play to earn. But to really focus in so heavily on making people feel okay for a double dilution is a matter of framing that as, well, you're going to eat a double dilution, not this was a coming cataclysm of 15% is too much. And we're also doing this other thing at the same time. Does that seem fair?
I understand what you're saying for sure. Essentially, you're saying because the two issues are interrelated, I think like we're trying to make essentially they compound exponentially the impact, but they're kind of they are really two issues. Essentially, is what you're saying.
Really are
right?
two issues. Yeah, because the choice of getting rid of the future prime sets imposes a bunch of incentive removals. Maybe it's more fair to say, I think it is at least somewhat fair to say, that it actually provides incentives for things that are against the core goals of Echelon.
Well, I guess the question I would have then, like, let's hear the contrarian take, right? Like, so Mr. Kavak, are you still there?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So I guess the question I would have for you is, if the same was true of the model that was last provided, but prime sets, because you said, we do want to have the new cards anyways. does that still satisfy your requirements, like on from your
Oh.
perspective?
No, because this is super bad for parallel ecosystem. I'm 100% behind Fall here. I think Boarding's ideas are complete illusion. I think everyone who has some common sense will realize that NFT cards are a tool for players to earn Prime. And this is absolutely key for the healthy P2E pool retention and acquisition motivation as Fall presented. Now the massive flaw in Boarding's line here is that like he somehow wants to keep the option for players and more incentives to buy more Prime sets. However, the reality is that the whales will just buy them all. I mean, let me give you an example just to back this up with an argument. And also, like Fall mentioned, he was around parallel, around PD1. I was buying sets around PD1 for 20 ETH, which were around 4K. That's $80,000 for one set. Now, many people were doing this, and we have a lot of vested interests in these sets. If new expansions are a set, we will just buy them all. And this is me saying honestly what our incentives here are based on the game theory perspective. If there is this window for passive friend seekers to get more value, we always have to take it. So if this notion of Prime sets keep earning new expansions being Prime sets, which Fall is categorically against. If this somehow was pushed through, that would just mean to investors buying them all and players lacking access to cards, which would be, in my opinion, an absolute disaster for the ecosystem.
Why would we care if whales buy them all on secondary? That's good for everyone. And unless you're saying you can Sybil attack the pack drops to just make sure nobody gets them, and that's a thing that could happen. But if you buy them all on secondary, that's good for everyone. Parallel gets royalties. The people that bought them made profit. It drives a lot of hype to the ecosystem. It's all good.
No, it's not, because we all know that people just paper-hand the sets, and I end up buying all of them. Like,
okay, so you let them cheat. They still get the royalties. I don't understand what the problem is. Parallel still got more revenue from their pack drop.
The problem still is that players don't have the cards which they need, and we provide incentives for the price to be higher, and that's just wrong.
So you're going to buy them and not lend them?
One thing I want to point out here is that what has worked for the ecosystem before the game has launched is not necessarily the ideal strategy for when the game is live. So it is correct that by removing the ability to construct parasets for future expansions is removing an incentive to purchase sets. But I believe what is not being properly recognized here is that there is a whole new set of incentives that are far more influential that will exist when the game is out. And that is acquiring these cards to begin the journey of earning Prime to acquire more cards and replicate and all of that. So the construction of parasets made more sense at the very start of this ecosystem's launch versus when the game is live. And being able to transition as an ecosystem based off of what products are available is important, and to look at what worked in the past and to say without a question that it is the best for what we must do moving forward is a mistake.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly jump in, then I've got to unfortunately run. I'm going to be late to another meeting, but I just want to say, actually, from this meeting, what I've determined is I understand all the perspectives here. I understand that they all come from theoretical and or like a high conviction place from everyone, and I appreciate everyone's feedback. And I'll have a conversation with the EPs to regroup after this call and just kind of determine where we land here. I personally don't know. I'm actually I have conflicting opinions. If I can just express this, I have conflicting opinions between a number of different of these components, and I'm obviously biased as a result of being both an EP and also working on the parallel side. I have a bias towards distribution. I do love the idea that everyone can participate in any of the systems that we created, rather than some sort of like horizon where you can no longer do this thing. But also I understand the logic of that fall and is saying, and essentially KVAC is echoing in some capacity here around incentive structures changing and the game coming online and the cards having utility and the transition to utilization of those cards for earning prime. And so I think there's a lot of valid conversation happening, and I think I appreciate it, and I'll have to ponder it from my side as well to see where I land. But I think I'll look forward to catching up with the other EPs as well and hearing what their take is. But I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone's opinion and expressing that. And I'll have to pop off in about 3 minutes. So thank you.
Yeah, I do think we want to kind of try to wrap this up here pretty quick. We're already at like an hour and 10 minutes. Aldezo, if you had a quick question or comment, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me up. Basically, I don't have a further question. I just want to bring a third voice, basically, just in short to the discussion. Just to voice my opinion to the issue. And first of all, I see myself also as a collector slash investor, whatever you want to call it. I know as a collector, there's differences in the terminology. What I want to say, I fully trust what does trust mean? I fully trust the decision making of the EPs with the goal of making the economy sustainable, and we should all have this as the primary interest, no matter prices, no matter collection, what the whales are doing, what the collectors are doing, because it basically determines the success of the game, because this is what 99.9% of games in the past failed at. You see things like Axie Infinity, like other games that went big, and I think the main issue was the lack of consideration of economics and the lack of sophisticated and sustainable economics in the ecosystem. So this has to be the #1 priority. And if modeling supports the decisions that were proposed in this bulletin or decided, then I'm fully behind that. I wouldn't think that I can come up with something better than the people that are working on it 24/7, basically.
You're so kind. I think everyone's going to think you're a mole.
No,
we planted you.
I wish.
I'm kidding.
Moles get paid. No. That's just my thoughts, like the logic thought train. There couldn't be another incentive than to make the game as successful as possible with this decision. And
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What to that point?
No, I was just going to say I couldn't agree more. I think obviously, like, what's best for the ecosystem is obviously paramount. And no one wants to knowingly commit to a failing model, right? So, and I'm in the same camp as you in some capacity. I'm trying to make sure I'm listening to as much of this as I can and learning as much as I can, while also, trusting the people who are working on the models to make the final calls, weighing all these facts.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And then the other point I think is, because there was, do we make the future cards a para set or prime set or not? I would also say what works well now or how things are now isn't necessarily a feasible option for when the game is out, to the point that Boarding was mentioning, I think. I mean, I know him because obviously we had our chats, and we're e-commerce, obviously, sitting in the marketplaces and in the chats, bouncing ideas. And we have a perspective of traders at the end of the day. And I know Boarding has this perspective too. I think, or at least how I perceive him, which is the same as mine. Also, I trade, I collect, a little bit of both, I would say. And I would also support the idea of, I like the idea of not making future cards parasets that can be caged, to exactly the point mentioned, to incentivize not hoarding the cards and making them expensive for the players or for the people that want to get in on the future releases, and simply for that fact, to incentivize or to make it more accessible in the future to get cards, NFT cards, without diluting the OG collectors. And I think this is a perfect measure for that, because every paraset you have now will be a premium paraset, so to speak, because you can cage it if you want it, and the others will be more kind of in circulation, if you want to put it that way. What I want to add, so my opinion is that it's a good decision as a trader, as someone who would love to have the prices of his cards go up, basically, and will buy every pack drop. You can bet on that. I would argue that this is the right decision. What I want to add to that is that I think the devil is always in the detail with so many things. Like you said, this 0.5%, which you took off the 5, which someone would like think, why would you do this? But slight changes like this can make significant changes on so many scales. And I think what comes into play here is the lending and the card sharing factor. How will this be implemented? Because I think a lot of issues that someone might have with this decision of not making future sets parasets can be somehow mitigated by designing the card sharing and lending in a good way for all participating parties. Like, one question would be, for example, I don't know if the info's out there, can a card.
You've just muted Aldezo.
Yeah. The point. Okay, I make it. I hope I'm back. You can hear me now.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, one question, for example, would be: can you lend out a card that you have caged, and will it uncage your set or not? This is, for example, one issue. And then it also comes down to how much percentage you get from the lending and so on. Not that I want any specific answers, not that there are possible specific answers. That's surely modeled or still in the process. But I think the decision can be mitigated and made feasible for everyone with those kind of tuning when we go into lending and card sharing.
Absolutely. So I need to run over to another meeting. I'm already 15 minutes late, and I just want to echo what Kalos has said here, in that I really appreciate everybody coming out and sharing your opinions about this particularly contentious topic and bulletin. We'll all get there as a community, and hearing your voices along the way and working with your voices and finding the best path forward is only possible if we all speak up for what we believe is right. So thank you again, everybody. And in regards to the card sharing system, there will be a news post about that coming soon. Can't say when, but it will cover all of those things. So keep your eyes peeled, and thank you again, everybody.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for letting me be a squeaky wheel. See you.
Cheers, guys. Catch you on the next one.
Cheers, brother.